Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. We're going to have a look at question 1 of the final of 2021 today. And all grades, grade 10, 11 and 12 should be able to do this. Grade 10s maybe only at the end of this year. The best is that you would do this paper with me, or maybe you try it yourself and then only watch the video. So go to www.education.gov.za. At the right bottom, you'll see a link to past papers, and from there you can download the final of 2021. You will have to look under information technology, and then you'll find the paper as well as the data files. So if you look at the first question, it tells us at the top there that we have to code in the form create event. So you need to double click on your form to do this code. And this is what they've asked. They asked us to display the text coding is. This is all in the label LBLQ1_1. Change the color of the text to green. Change the size of the font to 16 and the font to Arial. Press pause and try it yourself. So to get to the form create event, make sure you click on the form on those little dots and just double click in there. This is question 1.1. First part was fairly easy. All we had to do is change the caption of the label to coding is. Then we had to change the font color. Now I want to show you a little trick. If you click on a label, so the question says change the label. We have to write code for this, but we can use the object inspector to help us find what do we need to code. So if we look at the object inspector of this label, you will see the font there, and there's a little arrow there. I'm using Delphi 11. The other one, the arrow looks a little bit different, but there's still an arrow there. So you can click on that and then a drop-down menu appears. The question asked us to change the font color. So we'll start with the name of the object, LBLQ1_1, then dot font, then another dot and color. And in this list, you can actually click on this drop-down menu and have a look. Where is that green? They did give you the name CL Green. They gave it here, CL Green. I don't see it immediately, but it is in here. If we have a look, we'll probably find it here. CL Lime, CL Green, there it is at the top. So this part here is what goes on the right of the assignment statement. So we'll have lbl.font.color. This line here often represents then an assignment statement, and then we have to write what is on the right here. So we'll write CL Green. So therefore, in this code, I wrote lbl.font.color is assigned to CL Green. For the colors, you'll see there's a little prefix there. So it is important to know that you don't put that in quotes like we did with the caption. We just put CL Green there because it's actually code that was written behind this to change the color to green. The next question asks you to change the font size, and in the same way, at the moment I actually have the form there. So if I go back to my label, you can see we're going to code lbl.font.size assignment statement, and here I can see it's a number. So again, no quotes. So lbl.font.size is assigned to 16 as they asked me to do. And then finally, they asked me here to change the font to Arial. And here we can see under font, there's a name property. So name, so lbl.font.name this time. And here, if I click on my drop-down menu and you scroll to Arial at the top, you can see Arial is there. There's no prefix there like CL Green. The bold and italics have FS there for font style. So therefore, we need to put this in quotes and write Arial. So now you can run your program. And as soon as the program runs, you should see the changes there in your label. Coding is fun. In an exam, it is important to read the top part of the description of this question. And sometimes we have some hidden clues in there. So this is the next button. It asks us to determine how many packets of sweets this person needs. And they are hiking, and there are rolls of 8 sweets per roll. And they usually eat 4 sweets during a break, very strict hikers. And then we're going to use the spin edit to select how many breaks they want. And we then need to determine how many rolls of sweet they need. They now ask you to create a constant sweets per roll. Always make use of the values that they give you. So if they say call it sweets per roll with these underscores, just do that, because sometimes the provided code will make use of this, not that it did in this instance, but it also makes it easier to mark. They also call constants constant variables because they are variables even though they can't change. So don't get confused when they say create a constant variable. It just means create a constant. Remember, constants can't change. So this one here would be a value of 8. And we're only using this constant here in this procedure, so in this button here. So ideally it should be a local variable, but you would score marks for it even if you declared it as a global variable. But for next time, declare it as a local variable. And then they say declare suitable variables. For those of you guys that are really good programmers, don't skip steps of storing variables and declaring variables, because there are actually marks allocated for this. So we need to get input from the user for the number of breaks, and then we also need variables for the number of sweets and the number of rolls that they need to purchase. You then need to get input from the user for the number of breaks and calculate the total number of sweets they need. And here they say that they will have 4 sweets for each break. Then they say calculate the minimum number of rolls that need to be purchased to supply the hiker with enough sweets for the hike. Now remember, when you're purchasing a roll of sweets, you can't ask Pick n Pay for 1.5 roll. You either have to buy 1 roll or 2 rolls. So therefore, this is an indication that you will have to use ceil here to round your value up once you've divided by your number of sweets. And then you need it to display the rolls in the label. Press pause. I will show you some output just now. So on the left here is an example of 7 breaks. Try your output before you watch the memo, and also try and fix it. If you don't get the output, press pause, try it again, and then only watch the memo, because in the exam at the end, you are on your own. So it's important to struggle with these questions sometimes. And here is an example where we have 8 number of breaks. So first off, they asked us to create a constant, const, and this was the name they gave us. And remember, when we're declaring a constant, it's an equal sign and we give it a value. So this would be 8. Then my var with the variables that they asked me to declare, and then I'm getting input from the user. They used SPN as the prefix. Sometimes they use SED. It probably just depends on who the examiner is that year and what they prefer. So always just have a look at what it is called, and also the paper told you what it is called. So there's the input. Remember, our spin edit has a .value property, which is an integer, and that could very easily then be stored as an integer variable instead of using an int or a string to int. Now, for every break, they need 4 sweets. So I'm going to take my breaks times by 4 to determine how many sweets they have. So now I know how many sweets they have, but I need to know how many rolls do they need to buy. So I'm going to take my number of sweets and divide that by the number of rolls, the constant variable that I declared of 8, and that will determine how many rolls I need to buy of these sweets. Now remember I said you can't buy 1.5 packet from Pick n Pay, so we would need to round that value up, else I might have no sweets for my last break, and that would just be sad. So I'm going to round the value up, and that would determine the numbers of rolls that I need. All of these variables are actually integers. So when I'm displaying this, I'm going to use int string of I rolls, and that's the answer that I'll get. So let's test our program. And they told us there, what was the input? The input here for the first one was 7. Remember, when they give you more than one input, it means that by using both examples, you'll get different answers and possibly test for that seal that it is in there. So there we go. 7 breaks will give me 4 rolls. And then the next one is 8. And that would also give me 4 rolls. We can now move on to the next button, calculate volume. And there's more wording here than there's actually code to solve this. But they give you this shape, and it is a 3-dimensional shape because we're going to calculate the volume. So then they tell you here that you want to calculate the volume. This bottom part here, they just say volume of the tetrahedron, and then half of a sphere. There's the sphere. Okay, so we have to add those together. Then they say that the volume of this part of the shape is 133. You can actually use that as hard code. And then they give you the formula of the sphere. So that is for a full sphere, and you have to determine half of that. So basically, you need to take that and half of this and apply that to your Delphi code. So you can try that. I will soon just scroll down to the rest of the question to show you what you need to display. Here they're asking us to calculate the volume, combine the figures, and they also tell us that the radius is 3. So there's no input here, which was actually a bit confusing because we usually expect input, but there wasn't any. And then we had to display in a show message formatted to 1 decimal place the answer. Pause the video and I'll show you the memo just now. I didn't actually have to create variables for these 2 values. They were provided, but anyway, I did so. There's the radius of 3, the volume of 133. That was for that triangular part. And then we had to apply the formula. It was 4 divided by 3 times by pi times by the radius to the power of 3. So we could use power. Remember, power always returns a real answer. We also have divide, so that's also why our volume would be a real variable. But we can use power, which will raise our radius to the power of 3. And then this answer needed to be divided by 2, because remember that shape they gave us, if we go back here, was just half of the sphere. So for that reason, this needed to be divided by 2. And then in the show message, don't be lazy with the labels. There might be a mark for that label there. Don't just display the values. Always try to display the output as it's provided. Making use of floater string F, they said formatted to 1 decimal place. So formatting does not mean you have to round it. Round changes the value. Formatting means use floater string F to only show the last value here, or only 1 decimal place. So I'm going to use FF fixed and then comma 10, comma 1 to display only 1 decimal place. In the background, in the RAM, our volume will still have lots of variables, but we only see 1. Should you have used round, or round 2 rather, on this formula, you're now changing the actual value and it loses the last decimal places that you've rounded it off to. There is no input for this question. All it's asking us to do is to display, because remember the values of 3 and 133 was provided. So when I click on that, I should have a show message showing me volume, colon, and then the value matching my output with 1 decimal place. In the next button, display pattern, the user is going to select from a combo box, and we have to provide the output as a square of the symbol they selected. Now, if they selected the first symbol, this would be the @ then it would just show, well, the square 1 by 1. So it's just going to show it on its own. If the user selected the hash, which is the second symbol, we'll have a square of 2 by 2 and consisting of the hashes. Now remember, the first item in your combo box is item index 0, even though it is a 1. You could maybe use that in your code. So let's show you the rest of the question. So there they select, they said clear the output. They also want you to extract the symbol. We then also need to find the position of the symbol and then use nested loops to display the pattern in a block. So there's the @ just showing it on its own. This one is probably more significant. This was in position 3. So we want to see this item displayed 3 times, 3 rows and 3 columns. Now press pause and try it yourself, and I'll show you the memo soon. First part here asked us to clear the rich edit, and then we had to find the position of the character they selected. Now remember, that first character, the @ is in position 0. But I don't want to create a square with 0 by 0 dimensions. I want to create one with 1. So that's why I'm adding 1 to my item index. If they selected the third item, it would be item index 2 plus 1, and I will store in inum a 3, so I can create a 3 by 3 square. I have stored the input from the user here as a char data type, but a string would also work. I just wanted to remind you on how to store a char data type from an object like a radio group, combo box, or list box. I always use my dot items and then square brackets, name of the object, dot item index, which one that they click on. This here is a string data type. So to copy out only one character to be able to store it as a char, we simply add square brackets 1 there at the end. Now we need nested loops. They told us in the exam as well that we need nested loops. Few things to remember about your nested loop is, first of all, when you have nested loops, they can't use the same for loop variable. So I'm starting my outer loop with a K, and then my inner loop is for J. Now I want to create a square, so they're going to loop the same number of times. Inum being the value of how many times, what's my dimensions of that square. If it was 3, I'll loop with K from 1 to 3 as well as with J from 1 to 3. Now, inside of my loop, I need to initialize, and we call it an output string. Just any string that you're going to use to build a string with your characters that they selected here. And then we're going to display it. Now, in my rich edit, I can display 1 line at a time. So I'm basically really building 1 line at a time, 1 row at a time. I'm initializing the string here. And now I'm looping with J from 1 to inum. Then I build my string by adding onto it the character that they selected from there. So when K is 1, J will loop 3 times, and I'll have 3 of those characters stored in that single line. So I think that was this $sign here. I'll have 3 $signs next to each other when this loop is done, and then I display those 3. So now I have my first row of dollars displayed. I then loop again, and I set the output line, my output string, to an empty string again, and I build the next 3. and I output them underneath the first set. You can also have used a #10 here or a #13 and then display is outside of your loop, but then you would have to change this to also be outside of your loop. So you'll start with an empty string there and build the characters, and on this line here you would add the #10 or #13 to your line and only output outside of your for loop. That would also be correct if you use that method. So let's run it and we see how it works. So we want to test the output. We have to test, they gave us 2, so let's test the one with the @ that should just show 1, and then that one there, which should display a 3 by 3 square. This now brings us to the last question of question 1, and often the harder one of the ones before. So they usually end with a harder question. Don't get stuck on this, because remember now question 2 will again start with easy questions. You can also always come back to this question if you're stuck, but always try it and do whatever you can. In this question, we had to build a string with randomly generated capital letters until the same letter is generated consecutively. That means that the 2 letters following on each other has the same values. They have provided code here for us to clear the rich edit, and they also initialized an output string. So this is the output. This really explains what it needs to do. Randomly generated letters, capital letters, and as soon as 2 of them are the same, following on each other, then we should display the values. Now that means I don't know how many times this loop should execute. So I cannot use a for loop. I would have to use either a repeat or a while loop. Now I used a repeat loop because I know I have to generate at least one random character. They've also been so kind to give us the ASCII values of the letters from A to Z, and they tell us that A is 65 up to Z, that is 90. So that helps us to do this bullet here at the top. Remember, every time I loop, I want to generate a new random letter, and therefore it would have to be on the inside of the loop. Then you have to compile a string. That just means build a string, and repeat this until the last 2 are the same. And then you're going to display it in the rich edit. And each time the output string must include the final duplicate character. So it is going to show that final duplicate. Pause the video and try it yourself first before you watch the memo. So they have cleared here at the top, they cleared the rich edit for us. And they also declared and then initialized is output that I'm going to use to build the string with. Then I'm going to start on the outside of my loop with my first character. The reason I do that is because my repeat loop here, I'm testing if the current character is equal to the character before it. In other words, k minus 1. The problem is if I put the first character inside here, k would be 1, and now S out would try to go to k minus 1, which is 0, and there is no character 0, and my program will probably crash with a range check error. So k is my number of characters, so therefore I set it to 1 here because I'm adding the first one. So random range is being used. Remember the value of A was 65 and Z was 90. Remember to go 1 higher. And then what I did is I built a string making use of the char function. Remember, it's not char, the data type. I call it the char function. There's no A in there, which takes a number, an integer number, and then changes it to its corresponding ASCII value. And then I add it to this output string here. Now I'm ready to add the other characters. So I'm going to add the int k, so I can keep track of the number of characters I'm at to be able to do my testing. And every time I loop, I pick a new random number and I add that random character then using the char function of that random number. So this is the method you should always use to create a random string of letters from the alphabet. Of course, if they asked us to create 10 random letters from the alphabet, we could have used a for loop. It's just that we need to use a repeat loop here because we do not know at which point the two letters will be the same. So let's say it was A, and let's say that one was A and now another A is added. We should stop it immediately so it actually executes only once. However, if we had a whole bunch of other characters and eventually two G's, then it should stop. So what we're doing here is we're just testing if the current character, the new one that I added, so that would be the last one, is it the same as the second last one? So the one before that. Are those two the same? If they are, then my loop will stop and I added a clear here as well. I probably missed that instruction there at the top. This wasn't needed because they cleared it for us, and then we just display the output string. There are many solutions to this question, but I think as long as you haven't used an exit inside of the loop, you're not allowed to use exit inside of the loop, and when you run your code, you see that the first time that two letters are the same, your program displays that there aren't any other double values somewhere else. So you can run it many times, and every time you click on it, you will get different answers. Your answers will not look like the example of output, and therefore you would have to make sure that you just look carefully to see did yours stop at the right place. Now, if you're running your program and you find that you might fall into an infinite loop, you can check the following. Make sure that this variable that you are testing is in fact changing on the inside of your loop. With a repeat loop, we always have to change the value that we are testing. For more practice and explanations on question 1 of grade 12 final exams, including the conditional loops and string handling, you can go to my Dandelion Delphi book 1. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you soon.